or a 4B, which is a pretty tight curl pattern, and it doesn't seem like that, especially seeing his hair now, and it's just because of all the hair dye and the bleaching that he actually does, which that kind of loosens up his hair type and makes it look like a looser curl pattern. Obviously we see right here, this is earlier on, and it's very easy to see what his actual hair type is here before getting into all of the bleaching and the dyeing. But even with this photo, we're able to see the method in which he started out, which brings more clarity on why his dreadlocks look the way that they do now. And believe it or not, a lot of people actually do this method, and it's a very popular method to actually start out with, and I would encourage you guys to do the same if this is how you want your dreadlocks to actually look. So based on this photo, it looks as if he started out with a sponge rub, or even just allowing his hair to naturally lock up, especially with his hair type being a 4B or a 4A. With that hair type, all you really have to do is wash the hair and make sure that you're kind of scrubbing in the same direction, if I could put it that way. But say you literally scrub in a clockwise direction or a counterclockwise, as long as you're going the same direction the whole time, then your hair is going to want to start forming into these sections. But also to tag on to that, you can do the same thing with either sponge rub or towel rub. So that's essentially how he started out, and we do see that he does have sort of like a taper fade right here, and I believe now he does have a high top fade. But speaking of now, let's go ahead and skip forward a little bit of time, and we're able to see him with the locks. And this is what I was talking about with this hair type actually loosening up. And right here, it doesn't even look like he has dreadlocks, which right here, to be honest, he actually doesn't. It's actually just very loose, and obviously everything's in its sections, which is good. And this is a prime example for everyone out there who thinks that their dreadlocks have to be perfect all the time, or they have to be perfect since day one, and that's really not the case. We're able to see right here obviously what he's actually doing with his hair as well, and how he actually got that color, which I can explain to you as well, because a lot of people don't know how to get their hair this color, which he has like a white hair almost right here, but this is actually called a platinum blonde. But it's interesting to see his hair go from the first photo that we've seen to this right here, and I did my best to get these photos in order. I know some of them might be a little bit out of order, but they're still within the same time frame. But let's talk about how he actually got his hair this color. Now obviously this is initiated by bleaching the hair, so you can just get a hair bleach, and what typically has to happen, especially because he did have black hair or a dark brown hair, if you have that dark hair, you're gonna have to bleach it multiple times to get all the pigment out of it. And the pigment is just essentially all the hair color. So when you strip all the pigment out of the actual hair, it becomes a yellow, kind of bronzy color. And as you continue to do that, it just becomes lighter and brighter. Now, how do you get your hair this color? You can see a little bit of it at the tips of his hair. There's purple in it. And they actually have hair dye now to where you can actually do platinum blonde, but you have to have your hair blonde first, which you can only achieve that by bleaching it. So you have to bleach it and then do the platinum blonde. And then I would also recommend using purple shampoo, which helps out a lot, especially to brighten up any blonde areas. Because you can see that the consistency isn't perfect, but overall, I mean, he got a really consistent color, especially going from black hair. But yeah, I want to say again that his dreadlocks aren't completely locked up right here. Obviously his tips are very wispy. But this next photo is really cool to see, because this is most likely either right before the photo we just seen or right after. And even in this one, you can still see the purple hint in his hair. And essentially what the purple does is it color corrects the yellow, so it makes it more of a cool tone. That's where you get the platinum blonde. But even in this photo right here, we see that his hair is actually in the budding stage, which the dreadlocks go through multiple stages. You go through the initial locking stage, which you choose the method. Say you did twisting with gel, which right here we see him actually twisting the hair, and that could be him twisting the actual sections that were already created from the sponge rub or from the natural sections. So the initial locking, like I said, is twisting the actual hair, and then after that is the budding stage, which is when it starts to thicken up. And after the budding stage is the tightening phase, and that is when everything tightens and matures. So it's really kind of a 3-stage process. Obviously there's many other stages during those processes, but those are the 3 major stages. You have the initial locking, and then you have the budding, and then you have the tightening or the maturing stage. But moving on to this next photo, it's really easy to see his actual sections right here and how they're actually really clean and very well put together. He has about an inch size sections, maybe a little bit smaller, maybe 3/4 of an inch, which is a really good size. That's why he has so many dreadlocks. And a little tip for you guys, if you want more dreadlocks, make smaller sections. But I will say that it's easier to make smaller sections on a tighter curl pattern than it is a straighter curl pattern. So right here we do see his sections very well, but at the same time his hair still isn't completely matured, because we see his tips still frayed and they're still really in the budding stage right here. Now let's just fast forward some time, and one thing we do notice is that his tips are still not fully mature. His hair looks like it's almost in 2-strand twists, which could be a way of him actually maintaining the dreadlocks themselves. But one thing we do have to know about Ken Carson is that he maintains the length of his dreadlocks by trimming them. And this is very popular. So many people actually trim their dreadlocks in order to maintain the length. And if that was a question of yours, how do you actually maintain the length of the dreadlocks? How do you keep them one length the entire time? And it's really just trimming the ends and then butting them back up. And that could be the reason why we actually see the tips being frayed like that, is from him cutting them. And then, obviously they have to lock back up. So we're still around the same time frame right here, but we're able to see how much shrinkage is actually happening. And shrinkage is essentially just the hair tightening down. So we're into the third stage of the locking process. And like I said, you start with the initial locking, which is the method you choose, whether it be twisting with gel, sponge rub, towel rub. If you have straight hair, twist and rip. All these are the methods you can choose. And then it goes on to the budding stage, which it puffs up, and then it has to shrink back down, which is the locking stage, which I said was the tightening or the maturing. And that's what we're seeing right here. We're seeing the dreadlocks become more skinny and more tight. That's really what's going to happen. And here's another photo of that same day, and we're able to see his sections actually puffing up. And this really resembles Young Thug's dreadlocks, especially because he had them bleached. I'm not sure if he still does. But that contrast with the scalp or the new growth, it just looks very interesting. But we're definitely seeing that he does have dreadlocks now. And one thing I want to point out is that the dreadlocks on the back and the crown area of his head are extremely long compared to the dreadlocks that are close to his forehead and around where his fade is. And the reason being is because he's trimming those dreadlocks, so that's all pretty much the same length. Now here it's pretty obvious that he does have some pretty mature dreadlocks. Obviously we still see some, twist in there that shows the sign of, immaturity. But at the same time, they're all pretty much really locked up. The dreadlocks in the front towards his hairline are the ones that are having a bit trouble. And that's just to be expected, because that's the toughest hair to actually lock up, because it's very fine and very loose. That's typically what happens. Now looking at this last photo, which is around the same time, we're able to see that he's still rocking the very bright dreadlocks. One thing that's really interesting about his dreads is that some of them are really extremely tight, and then some of them are extremely loose. And some of them look like they're still in two-strand twists, which I don't think he ever did two-strand twists based on the photos, but he does have those really coiled up dreadlocks. And it's really cool to see that that's the diversity of his actual dreadlock, is that there's some really tight, some really loose, and overall